If the fruit of righteousness is peace, then what causes the flow of peace to sometimes be disrupted? Let's consider possible disturbances to our peace in this episode of Growing in Grace. Ephesians 2:14 teaches us Christ himself has brought us peace. Jesus does not give us peace only to take it away. If peace is absent, then it is us who have moved away from it. In a way, this is good news, because if we are responsible for the movement away from peace, then we also can make necessary changes to return to peace. Like an air conditioning filter that gets clogged with dust, our emotional and spiritual filters can become clogged, obstructing our ability to feel God's peace. There's nothing wrong with the flow, it's the filter that needs attention. Let me suggest 3 possible clogs to peace that I routinely see in the counseling office. Let's first look at sin. Sin and trauma wound the soul. This can be our personal sin or another person's sin against us. I had a client who experienced severe depression as a direct result of sexual sin. Once the client terminated an extramarital affair, the depression completely resolved. King David also experienced this reality in Psalm 32, when he himself was in sexual sin with Bathsheba. Once David repented to God for his sin, his peace returned. When it is another person's sin against us, the psychological task needed is to process anger and loss, and to move toward forgiveness, which is the cure for anger. Once we have dealt with the sin through repentance or forgiveness, step 2 is to submit to God's healing for the woundedness in our souls. Christians often do really well with step 1, dealing with the sin, but don't always continue on to step 2, finding healing in God's love and grace. This is where therapy can help. Another possible clog to God's peace is violating God's design laws. God established fixed principles upon which reality operates, like the law of gravity, the law of health, and the law of love. Harmony with God's laws always brings health and happiness, but violations result in the system breaking down. We cannot violate the laws of health through poor diet, a sedentary lifestyle, neglect of chronic illness, or substance abuse and expect to be healthy. Similarly, God's law of love, which is based on the principle of giving, can be disrupted by thoughts and behaviors that go against love. God's love is a constant cycle of giving. If your peace has been disturbed, evaluate what you may have stopped giving, like love, grace, forgiveness, or time, which may have infected the cycle. For a deeper understanding of God's design laws, look at the excellent work of Dr. Timothy Jennings. Finally, let's consider unrealized expectations. Sometimes we expect people to meet needs that only God can. We can also have healthy and reasonable expectations, but for many reasons, including the will of other people, those expectations may not be realistic for our particular circumstances. Desired outcomes that have not been realized are a loss. What do we do with losses? We grieve them. What expectations do you need to have a funeral over? When we can grieve an unrealized expectation, then we're not constantly looking for it. Accepting the reality of not getting something we want creates an opportunity for a new dream to rise up that is more attainable. Accepting is not the same as liking. We can accept something even though we don't like it. This is called radical acceptance. Try to identify if sin, violation of God's design laws, or unrealized expectations have moved you away from your God-given inheritance of peace. Having awareness of our contribution to the disruption of the flow of peace is pivotal in making needed adjustments to unclogging the filter. I bless you as you clean out emotional and spiritual filters so that the full force of God's provision is freely experienced in your life. And I pray that you continue growing in grace.